just in the gay community, but people outside as well. Because I think everyone can relate to searching to find out who they are, not fitting in, and the like. And I think that's what the film is really about.
You
But
you
it's just,
you featured 3 or 4 people. One of them is Simon, who
yes,
similar to yourself. Steelers got him out of a very bleak spot, and he really found a community. The movie's about acceptance and community in many ways. One of the stars is a woman called Nick.
yes,
She's she's gay, and she's the head coach. What gold she is in terms of documentary, right? She cries.
yeah.
She cries. She cries constantly. She is so attached to this team.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I was in a different team from the one that's sort of featured in the film, and I didn't really know Nick all that well. And we were filming on the first day, and I didn't have all the characters lined up yet. It was still very much a work in progress. And I was sitting on the tram back to the hotel next to her just by chance, and I was like, Nick, how did you get into rugby anyway? And she told me the story about how her grandfather inspired her to play, and it's this beautiful, tender moment in the film. And I was like, right, you're one of the people that we're going to interview. And I didn't set out to include a gay woman in this sort of story about this gay men's rugby club, but I think she sort of examines masculinity in a very interesting way. She talks about how her players feel like they're successful at work, in the club, but then when it comes to the pitch, she really had to instill in them that they are entitled to their place on the pitch. They deserve to be there, and I think she's really true. She's completely correct on that.
She's a lion, isn't she? I mean, she doesn't take any nonsense.
I love her so much, but she says in the film that those people who get to know her realize that actually she's a bit of a pussycat, and what I found interesting about her story is that even in the gay community, there is sexism and misogyny. Gay white men definitely dominate in terms of the demographics there, and there is still. She finds it tough. Referees often overlook her and think she's the water girl, when in fact she's played for Wales, and she has this incredible knowledge, and she's a fantastic coach. And when I was editing the film and getting some advice from some of my producer friends, one of them said, well, you need to establish at the beginning her credentials, because I just saw this woman coach and I thought, oh, it's this PC kind of gay club appointing this woman as the head coach. And I really reflected on that, thinking, okay, do we need to kind of establish her credentials right at the start? But then I thought, actually, I really like the fact that as an audience, you might watch the film thinking, who is this woman? But then throughout the film, your kind of prejudices are broken down and you realize she's this incredible person who is just as entitled to be in that position, even more so than a lot of the men who are head coaches of clubs.
And then there's Drew, a.k.a. Drew Alicious, drag queen by night. He's a character, isn't he?
Yes, I've never seen a man as big built as he is be able to jump into the splits.
No, no. How is that possible? I thought you had to have some kind of CG going on that cut.
Nope. He is a cracker too, and he has an interesting story because he sort of stumbled into drag while organising a fundraiser for the club, and loved it, and it was so successful, and it's turned into this big night event on the gay scene in London each year. It's a massive fundraiser for the club, this sort of drag show the club does. But a lot of the previous players who set up the club had a bit of a problem with it, because they thought that, and he says it in the film, they thought that the club was feeding into the stereotypes that gay men are sissies and just want to dress up in women's clothing. But I think the point he tries to make is that you can just be whoever you are, and it's about having that confidence. You can be a drag queen, you can also be a rugby player, you can be fierce on the stage, you can be brutal on the pitch, and it's just about finding who you are and being authentic to that.
And that's what the head coach, Nick, says, that she saw the confidence of the players grow as they, claimed a place in sport. They felt entitled to play. They didn't have to feel... And I suppose that's what the community of the team does for them. But in future, do you imagine that, nobody will ask a rugby player about their sexuality?
Absolutely. And I think we're moving in that direction because I hear stories of kids coming out when they're 13 years old at school and no one batting an eyelid. And I think the internet and social media plays a huge role in that because when I was growing up in the closet and questioning who I was, the only gay people I saw in mainstream media was Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And they ham up the stereotypes and were kind of ridiculed at the boarding house I was in. And now it's everywhere. I mean, I'm on this show. It's in the New Zealand International Film Festival. It's a mainstream festival, and there's that visibility. So I think we're moving in that direction. But then I look at some of the comments that are on the All Blacks post. It's a small minority, but it's still there. And you can imagine there's a lot of people who think things that they don't post about. And I hope, I wanted to make this film for my younger self who didn't have that confidence and who wanted to change who I was and tried to take my life, and all because society told me that who I was not good enough. And I hope now with this visibility and like making this film, that the All Blacks posting about it last night to their 7 million followers, it's all little steps that builds a better world, where we want to be, where I want to be.
Israel Folau didn't put any comments up, did he?
Israel Folau, no,
Yeah.
not that I saw.
I mean, you
But
would have been
he was
happy
at-
that he was sacked by Rugby Australia for his homophobic comments expressed on social media, but he's now playing for the Catalan Dragons in France. Do you think that he should be?
Well, it just goes to show that, if someone wants something bad enough from another person, they can kind of look the other way. And I think I report on US politics over here, and you see that a lot over here, people looking the other way when it's convenient. And speaking of Israel Folau, he actually inspired this film to be made in part because I filmed it, and I won't ruin the ending, but it kind of it took a turn, and I didn't know how to finish the film, and I was sort of sitting on it, and then I did this edit and I reformatted my computer accidentally and I lost it, and I was like, right, I just can't make this film. And then I sat on it for about 6 months, and then he started posting all his posts. Hella hates homosexuals, and I was like, you know what, I have to make this film because I want people who look up to him, young kids, to see my film and realize they can be who they are. And Kim, I got a message on Instagram just before I came on your show from a kid in school in New Zealand who went to the film last night, and this makes me a bit teary, with his parents. And he said that he's battling depression, has a similar story to mine, gets bullied. And he said, my film gave him hope that things do get better. And yeah,
That's the
why I
best
made
you
the
can.
film.
That's the best you can hope for, right? I mean, that's what you will be wanting.
Yep. It pulls on the heartstrings because for me it was a real I mean, I can't, it feels like a different lifetime ago when I was growing up, but I just had built up so many walls. I shut my family out. I hated who I was, and I was putting my head on the pillow last night, and I had tears of joy because it was a complete 180, and I was thinking back to when I used to lie in the bed when I was a teenager, and I used to wish the gay away. I used to hate who I was, and I was like, wow, things have changed, and the All Blacks retweeting my story last night was just complete validation. So,
And on a personal note, I only have a minute left to deal with this.
sure.
You are the subject of a Mail Online story of almost exactly a year ago, and the headline is husband who lost his wedding ring down a drain calls firefighters to pop the lid before delving into handfuls of sewage sludge to finally retrieve it. Fame at last. Given that it's Mail Online, is that a true story?
It is a true story.
And did you
was
get it
about
back?
I was not leaving until that whole area was torn up because my husband would not have taken me back home had I come home without my wedding ring.
Wow, you must have been pretty smelly by the time you got home.
Yes, and tingly, and I scrubbed my hands with about different kinds of bleach.
Lovely to talk to you. I've been talking to Eamon Ashton Atkinson, who is the director and the narrator of a film in the festival called The Steelers.
RNZ News at 11 o'clock, Morena. Good morning, I'm Anna Thomas. The Minister in charge of Managed Isolation, Megan Woods, and the top official, Air Commodore Darren Webb, are holding a media conference at Parliament. We will cross live when that starts. But in the meantime, 4 of the 5 people who absconded from a managed isolation facility in Hamilton last night are appearing in court today, charged with breaching the Health Act. A woman and 4 young people escaped by jumping the fence at the hotel in Tarapa. The woman and 3 of the young people were detained in
Well, good morning, everybody. We're here to give you an update on the returnees in managed isolation who absconded from the Distinction Hotel in Hamilton last night. As you know, 1 adult and 3 children were apprehended soon after, with a 4th person overnight. The family had returned to New Zealand following the loss of a close family member. While we can understand their grief, we cannot allow one tragedy to turn into a tragedy for hundreds by allowing COVID-19 any opportunity to get back into our communities. As we have always said, keeping COVID contained at the border relies on the managed isolation system operating within strict rules and parameters. This requires returnees to comply with the rules, and these people broke the rules. I want to thank the New Zealand Defence Force personnel and the police for their swift action in apprehending these people. I'm now going to hand over to Air Commodore Webb, who will outline some of the details of what happened when last night, and then we will take your questions. Thank you.
Minister. This family arrived into New Zealand from Brisbane on flight NZ 146 on the 21st of July, and they landed here at 5:15 p.m. They were transported to the Distinction Hotel in Hamilton. Upon arrival, they requested an exemption to spend time with the family member and a recently deceased close relative and to attend the funeral. This request was declined as the health risk was deemed too high at that point in time, noting that they had not yet conducted a Day 3 test. A further request was made yesterday to view the body ahead of the funeral, and a detailed plan was being considered to enable this to happen. This involved extensive work, discussion with iwi, Māori wardens, police and the funeral home itself. At 6:15 p.m. last night, the family were contacted by my team and advised that we were actively considering their application and doing everything we could to support it. They were made aware that the application process was looking positive and that they will be given a decision by 8 p.m. last night. At 6:58 p.m, the police officer doing routine patrols on site saw people climbing over the perimeter fence. The police officer and an NZDF person gave chase. 4 of the 5 were returned to the facility by 7:50 p.m. One individual couldn't be located and was found and detained by police subsequently at 4:40 a.m. in Auckland, 10 hours after leaving the facility. In regards to security at our facilities, we've made ongoing improvements to all aspects. This includes the on-site presence of police, additional security staff, and at a number of locations, additional further fencing. In addition to that, we have increased the information passed to arrivals in terms of verbal briefs and written documentation to make it crystal clear of their obligations. These facilities are not prisons, and nor should they be. This was a premeditated and planned attempt to break the law and leave this facility. 4 out of 5 of them were back within an hour, and the last was back within 10 hours. Minister.
Thank you. Questions?
How are they able to escape seemingly secure isolation facilities?
So the information that we have from the facility is that a window was forced open, broken off its security latches, and then a 6-foot fence was climbed. I want to re-emphasise the point that Air Commodore Webb just made. These are hotels, not prisons.
They go.
They climbed the fence and they were located in a nearby park. It appears that was the location they stayed in for the majority of the time that they were found and apprehended by the police.
How did waiting to be picked up? Is it your understanding they perhaps were waiting to be picked up from this park?
Well, one of them was subsequently taken to Auckland via vehicle, so that would be a reasonable inference, but the swift actions of the police and the NZDF were able to contain the remainder of the family and bring them back to the...
Are there consequences for the person who obviously worked with the young person to get to Auckland?
Yeah, so I can tell that the 17-year-old has been charged. They will be appearing in the youth court today under the charge under the COVID Act.
The person who helped them?
That's a police matter and they'll be dealing with that.
The 4, will they be charged?
They have been charged and they're appearing in Hamilton Court this morning.
So can you just give us a breakdown of the 5 people? How many were adults, how many were children, what sort of age range are we talking about?
Yeah, so we have a mother, 4 children, 12, 15, 17 and 18. And it was the 17-year-old who was the one who absconded to Auckland, and the remainder were in Hamilton.
So we've got a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old who have been charged by police?
No, yes, the 17-year-old charged in Auckland, and then the family who remained in Hamilton also charged under the COVID Act.
Including a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old?
That's a matter for the police in terms of that.
I'm just wanting to confirm that's what's happened. You're saying that a family has been charged, the other 4 have been charged, so that includes a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. Is that appropriate?
Look, we'll need to confirm particularly around the 12-year-old, and we'll do that after this press conference.
Are any members of the public now having to go into isolation?
So what is happening now is that there's two public health responses, one in Hamilton, one in Auckland. The family are being interviewed this morning, those that are in Hamilton, to ensure there weren't any close contacts through that period. Likewise, Public Health in Auckland are dealing with the 17-year-old in terms of doing the interview process around any close contacts that may need to be dealt with in that way. So we have spoken to the Ministry of Health and the Minister of Health this morning, following up on what is happening in terms of contact tracing.
Can you confirm that their family member? Can you confirm that their family member was their father?
Oh, look, we're not going to confirm any details around the family circumstance.
What is the criteria for special exemption?
Well, I'll start by saying exemptions are absolutely special, and we need to keep the health and safety of the public of New Zealand uppermost in our minds. So every time we go through that process, we need to keep that as a paramount point. There are some strict criteria that we go through with a health assessment form. They consider such things as where the location of these people have travelled from, how many countries they've transited through en route, how many days they've been in New Zealand, whether they've had a negative test, for example. That results in a pretty good early health picture to give us a sense of whether or not we think we're endangering additional people outside the facilities. Things such as where they're going to go to and what their visit plan is are also considered. And so again, they all factor into the decision making about whether we would exempt somebody or not.
At what point
Were they carrying? What sort of threat, in terms of a health threat, were they carrying as a family?
Well, they're returning New Zealand citizens or permanent residents who are coming from somewhere other than New Zealand. We've said many times before that our managed isolation facilities are set up to ensure that we're putting in place protections against COVID. And this is the fact that everybody who is entering New Zealand is required to isolate in these facilities. The threat is clear. It is COVID, and it is the way in which we protect New Zealanders' health and the gains that New Zealanders have made.
There's no consideration though about, in terms of the criteria for a special exemption and the assessment. In that assessment, you're not looking at, look, these guys have come from X country, transited, through, like, there is no assessment of the health risks specifically, perhaps, from where they've come from?
Oh no, that's absolutely part of the assessment.
For this family?
Well, every case that comes into New Zealand at the moment, we need to consider as a potential positive COVID case. So the first thing we need to do is ensure that we've done a negative test on day 3. So that is why we had the original decline response, because that was they just arrived into New Zealand. We expedited that process for them. We did the negative day 3 test, got those results back, and before we were comfortable to say actually we can progress this exemption request further, we need to understand that first key point. We got those results back, and that also enabled us then to work through what the follow-up plan would be.
Thomas.
The results were negative then? Sorry, this is an important point. The results were negative, were they, or positive?
Yes.
Negative.
So
Yes.
can you see then why the family may have wanted a bit more urgency and perhaps felt the need that they had no other choice but to leave?
Look, I'm going to answer that. So this is a family that arrived in the country on the 22nd.
Late 21st?
The late 21st. An application was made on the day after they arrived. This was before they'd had their day 3 test. I want everyone to consider we're now at the 25th of July. Those day 3 tests were undertaken. The negative results were communicated both to the decision makers and to the family. At 6:15 last night, the family received a call saying their updated plan around an exemption was being considered and that a decision would be made by 8 o'clock. I think this was an incredibly swift process and complicated decision-making process that was put in place, that was to have empathy for the family and what they were going through, but putting in place the protections that are required for New Zealanders.
Updated plan was going to
What time did
be.
you get those test results back?
What time?
The day 3 test results back were received in the middle of Friday afternoon.
Updated
Friday
plan
afternoon.
going
Sorry,
to be.
so was that Friday afternoon the same? So that was yesterday?
Yesterday.
So you received them in the middle of the day?
No,
So,
mid to late afternoon.
oh, mid to late afternoon.
Yep.
And then a new plan needed to be worked up and the family were communicated with. As late as 6:15, before that they made the decision to leave the facility at 6:58. And
David
given an
Lamb was like-
indication that that was looking positive, but a final decision would be made at 8 o'clock. Sorry, Thomas, you had a...
And I'm guessing that it sounds like the final decision was probably that they would have been granted an exemption, and that would have meant that they would probably have been leaving today.
So they would have been granted an exemption, a special exemption to go and view the body in very tightly managed circumstances, and then they would have been escorted back into the facility for the remainder of their time.
Is there a sense that with people who are grieving and going through what sounds like a very difficult time, is there a sense that perhaps these people, maybe a closer eye should be kept given the probably emotional position that they're in?
So in terms of the security that is at the facilities, that we have taken steps in recent days to bring on more security guards. I want to emphasise that a window was forced open and a 6-foot fence was climbed for these people to get out. That Air Commodore Webb and I have visited this facility. It's one we've looked around. There is a single point of entry with guards on it. It is very clear that you are not meant to leave this. We absolutely understand that coming home at a time of grief is an incredibly difficult situation for anyone to be in. But New Zealanders all over the country through level 4 had to deal with similar circumstances where they couldn't gather to grieve, where they couldn't see dying loved ones. This was a sacrifice we all made to protect each other. We are asking that those returning New Zealanders also have that patience while we work through robust processes and decision making so that we can protect New Zealanders and the gains that we've made.
Have they now ruined their chances of viewing that body?
Well, the funeral was continuing, and so these people are not in attendance, and so I think your answer is absolutely.
Is there still a possibility that those children involved will be granted exemption to go and view the body?
Well, our understanding is the funeral is occurring this afternoon, and that the children, the three of the 4 children are in Hamilton, not Auckland.
They're back in the Distinction Hotel, are they? And are there any extra security measures around their room?
Yes, so they're back in the Distinction, and yes, we do have additional security measures in place.
And is the teenager in Auckland also being returned to Hamilton, or what's that?
No, the teenager is currently in custody in the police, and we are working out a plan as we speak to ensure they are one family unit, and we'll be co-locating them in one place.
Did they give any explanation as to why they just couldn't wait for that extra couple of hours for that decision to be made? Was there a window closing for them for some reason? Or
You'd have to ask them that. I haven't had the chance to do so.
Was that 17-year-old picked up in the car, or had they made their way to a residence?
No, they were found in a residence in Auckland. I think the police have done a really good job of working that through with the appropriate sensitivities and encouraging the right decision to be made, and the 17-year-old offering to come into police.
So that person would have close contacts then. What's happening with them?
So that's what I talked about in terms of the two public health units, one in Hamilton, one in Auckland, that is following up in terms of what contact tracing would be required, and that is happening as we speak.
What's the advice to those people in the house at the moment, though? Are they isolating? Do they need to be tested?
So we have had some detail around advice that has been given to the people whose house they were in.
Yeah, so we've worked with the Auckland Public Health Unit, and our advice to them is please don't attend the funeral. Their assessment of the public health risk is still low, based on the health determination of incubation of the virus, etc. So therefore, if they are absolutely determined to attend your funeral, then the advice is please make sure you are maintaining your physical distance and just consider the broader requirements for the New Zealand's public safety.
A special rahui was placed by Te Arawa Iwi in an isolation facility in Rotorua. Is that a consideration that you'd have for every new facility that's open?
So the approach that we've taken when we've visited centres where facilities may be opening up is that we have met with local iwi and local hapu around what they would like to do. Te Arawa wanted to do this in the case of Rotorua, but in other parts of the country this hasn't been something that iwi want to do. So it is part of our discussions, we raise it, but it's something that Te Arawa have made their own, and I think some of the videos that I've seen around what is happening between Te Arawa and people that are going to Rotorua are quite beautiful.
At what point are you going to consider sort of putting electronic bracelets on people and guards on every door? Is that something that is still within the realms of possibility?
Well, I just want to go back to something we said about 5 weeks ago. None of us had an individual NZDF person or police person or security guard outside of our front doors while we did our 5 weeks of level 4 lockdown. There does need to be some personal responsibility from these returning New Zealanders, citizens and residents who are coming back to rejoin the team of 5 million, that they are in 14 weeks managed isolation for a reason, and that's to keep their fellow New Zealanders safe. And to protect the gains that we have made. We enjoy some of, well, the most liberty socially and economically of any country in the world. We are asking New Zealanders who are returning to rejoin that team. In terms of putting a individual guard outside of each door, that is something that we would have to think very carefully about putting that cost on the rest of New Zealanders.
But arguably the stakes are now higher. If these people get out, then we all have to go back into lockdown and we all have to sacrifice again. So given that those stakes are higher, shouldn't the precautions also be higher?
I'm going to emphasise just how strong the precautions at these facilities are. We have 4 to 5 New Zealand Defence Force personnel at every facility. We have police at every facility. We have security guards at every facility. We're talking about a group of people that forced open a window and climbed a 6-foot fence in order to escape. These are hotels that we are putting in case very strong measures to make sure that people cannot escape, but I do want to point you to the fact of how quickly this issue was resolved and how New Zealanders are being kept safe through this process.
I would add to that. We've had over 30,000 people through our facilities over this period of time. We have had a very small number of people who've chosen not to do the right thing, and again to emphasise the point that the rapid response and the follow-up contact tracing done to date has demonstrated that that risk has been contained.
An ankle bracelet is a violation of personal liberties, though. It's just, it's just a piece of clothing, really.
Oh, look, the issues around ankle bracelets are complex. Some of them are around legal position, but actually more practically in terms of how it is that you would monitor that many people using that technology. A range of technologies are being considered, but it really comes down to what is the most effective way of making sure we're keeping New Zealanders safe. Ankle bracelets would have told us where these people were. Actually, the other systems we had in place allowed us to do that. We had an NZDF personnel who followed this family and kept eyes on until they could be brought back. We knew that someone had got in a car and was travelling to Auckland because monitoring was happening, and we were able to follow that up through our police approach to this. So that wouldn't have given us any more information than we had in this situation.
It would have perhaps acted as a further deterrent.
Well, I would have thought that a window that had to be forced open and a 6-foot fence that needed to be scaled, as well as having guards on the gates of the facility and security guards, military and police in the facility would have acted as a deterrent. I don't think it necessarily follows that an ankle bracelet would have been a further deterrent.
The window that was forced. Some clarity around what's happening with that driver. Are they being charged?
That's a matter for police. It's in something that police will make decisions around.
The window that they forced open, I'm just at the back here. I assume that was in the room they were staying, and was that room on the ground floor?
All the rooms at this facility are on the ground floor.
Just going back to those children, are you going to offer any support for them for what's obviously been a very difficult time?
Oh, absolutely. So the approach that we take in all of our managed facilities is that there is health support in the broadest sense available for people that go in. It's not just swabbing for day 3 and day 12 tests. We recognise in terms of mental well-being and mental health, we have some New Zealanders who are returning home in challenging situations. They may have been in quite challenging places in the world or coming home to a set of circumstances. So the wraparound support that family needs will be put in place.
Have surfaces in that park been cleaned?
Look, all of the public health measures are being followed up. We can clarify that for you, but in terms of the public health response, that has been followed through exactly as our procedures would want, but we'll follow up on that specific for you.
Specifically, what time the test results came back?
I can find that out for you.
Thank you.
This is just another, does it re-emphasise the need for New Zealanders to actually get up to speed with contact tracing, so that, it seems like inevitably at some point there will be a breach of someone who is positive, and there might be a case of community transmission. New Zealanders should be prepared for that, and that means contact tracing.
Look, I think that a big part of the many layers of defence that we need to put in place for New Zealand to keep ourselves COVID-free is all of us taking the responsibility to be swiping in and out of places, so that if the worst happens, that we do have a fast way to do contact tracing. I would like to re-emphasise the Minister of Health's call for all of us to be making sure we're using the COVID app.
And just that address in Auckland, how did you find that?
The police used that, but it was an event that was taken very seriously by police. I understand the Eagle helicopter was also called in.
Auckland, was it?
I don't have that detail to hand.
Just the burial of the deceased person today?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.